ASEAN diplomats issuing a joint statement following a closed-door meeting in Manila. Now, they're calling for respect for international law, protection of civilians, freedom of navigation, and maritime security. Officials described the document as a landmark step towards practical cooperation on regional development and community building.
We must continue this journey together because cooperation is no longer a choice. It is a strategic necessity. In a fractured global landscape, no single nation can weather these storms alone. Our strength and resilience lie in our community. Acting together, it is our shield against external pressures and our engine for regional stability.
More on the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. We're joined by Lucio Blanco Pitlo III of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and Research Fellow, Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation. Thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Pitlo. We heard there from the Philippine Foreign Secretary, strategic cooperation working together is a strategic necessity. We've had support, explicit support from Washington and Canberra for what's happening in the South China Sea. For the Philippine position, is the support something they are looking for, publicly expressed as it is?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So certainly the support of allies and partners in relation to the situation in the South China Sea is very much appreciated on the part of the Philippines. So recently, of course, the 10th anniversary of the South China Sea Arbitration Award has been marked and commemorated in the Philippines. And 14 countries, including the Philippines, have expressed support to this final and binding ruling, and that this is part of the Philippine strategy in dealing with the disputes. And at the same time, this is a peaceful and legal approach to finding a way out of this intractable spat between coastal states of Southeast Asia and China.
This support, so 12th of July, you had 14 countries coming out to reaffirm the 2016 ruling that largely invalidated China's claims in the South China Sea against the Philippines. But of the 14 countries, none of them are from the ASEAN region. The only other Asian country to come out in support, along with the Philippines, would have been Japan. The others would be US, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Germany. These are not in ASEAN. With the Philippines wanting to be hearing support from these countries rather than from ASEAN when they need to reach a code of conduct with China, between ASEAN and China?
Of course, that's a good point. So perhaps, of course, the calculations and the assessments, the security and geopolitical considerations, the relations of other ASEAN countries with China and with the US and other partners are, of course, variables that may have affected their calculus in relation to the joint statement. But certainly G7 countries, Japan, are traditionally very supportive of the approach taken by the Philippines, notably the arbitration. But of course, the ASEAN countries have some reservations or misgivings, perhaps because they think that there might be other approaches that should have been exhausted first. But that's already water under the bridge. But so for the Philippines now, I think the priority is to try to get the rest of ASEAN around the, supporting the conclusion, the early finalization of the Code of Conduct on the South China Sea, as the Philippines host the rotating ASEAN chairmanship. And for other coastal states, of course, they also wanted a rules-based order at sea and to prevent untoward incidents going forward. And we have seen in recent times a surge in close calls, run-ins, and posturing. And this kind of dynamic is very risky. The stakes are high should an accident occur. And so I think this is one impetus driving the negotiations, to conclude the COC.
Mr. Pitlo, it's worth stressing that finalizing the code of conduct is, as an agreement, is likely in some ways easier than reaching some kind of implementation on the 2016 arbitral ruling.
Well, perhaps there's quite a significant difference in the sense that the South China Sea Arbitration Award is a unilateral undertaking by the Philippines. Of course, Manila views this as a peaceful and legal approach, creating a pathway to resolve or at least narrow the disputes in the South China Sea. But the Code of Conduct negotiations, this is ASEAN, 11 countries now, and China, sitting down and finding a code that would govern behavior at sea, especially for their maritime law enforcement assets, agencies that operate in the sea. And so preventing accidents, preventing situation turning into a crisis, and preventing conflict, from arising in this flashpoint is a consensus. No? It's a general shared interest of all, regardless of how they view the legal approach taken by the Philippines back in 2013, of which a resounding judgment had been rendered in 2016.
So in other words, for the finalizing of this code, there is actually real value in continued dialogue. So, for example, China's foreign minister likely to meet the Philippine foreign secretary on the sidelines of the EAS foreign ministers meeting this week as well at the ASEAN summit. There's real value beyond just rhetoric in keeping both sides talking at high levels.
Agree. So I think it's very important that both sides continue to talk, especially Manila and Beijing, because of their volatile relations, affecting not only the security aspect but also regrettably parts of people-to-people exchanges and economics between the two sides. And so this East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers meeting is an opportunity for the Philippines and Chinese foreign leaders to discuss, hopefully set the stage for top leaders meeting between President Marcos and, of course, the Chinese premier, who may come to Manila late this year for the East Asia Summit Leaders Meeting. And if President Marcos will attend the APEC Leaders Summit in Shenzhen. So I think this meeting between Secretary Lazaro and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is a chance to arrest a downward spiral in the relations, stabilize the volatile South China Sea issue, at least prevent untoward encounters from reaching a diplomatic crisis that would make it very hard for both sides to appear weak, in their domestic publics. And, at the same time, look at the broader aspects of the relations, perhaps look at areas where they can converge. Philippines is the chair of ASEAN this year. China is hosting APEC. So perhaps the economy, particularly digital economy, might be an area where both sides can work together, especially here in ASEAN, with the potential conclusion of the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement. And last year, under Malaysia's chairmanship,
Mr. Pitlo,
the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement
but a final question.
3.0 was upgraded.
I know it's a broad relationship, but we need to return. Final question to the Code of Conduct. So given that is a concrete deliverable by the end of this year by the Philippines as ASEAN chair, you were more upbeat earlier this year. How are you on that being finalized by the end of this year as agreed as a common target? Final question.
Well, I think that recent incidents, including this one in Second Thomas Shoal, and of course the sanctions imposed by China on Defense Secretary Teodoro, and of course, the China Daily AI-generated portrayal of the Philippines, all these developments does not contribute to creating a climate for, stabilizing ties, with the hope that this would contribute in concluding the document. So the possibility is still there to getting the document done, but the nature of the document is also very important, whether it's legally binding, which the Philippines, I think, hopes, but for some, it might be too restrictive. So these are, the obstacles in concluding the document are there. So we will see the sincerity, the goodwill, and also the tenacity of the 12 countries to getting this document done by end of this year.
Thanks, Lucio Blanco Pitlo III. A quick reminder, of course, we still have yet to reach agreement on, as you mentioned, legally binding and, of course, scope as well on any code of conduct. Mr. Pitlo III speaking to us from Metro Manila.